Her ex invited her to his engagement party, just to humiliate her, but he didn't know she would arrive, with the most feared man on the East Coast. Elena was supposed to walk in poor, embarrassed, and alone. Instead, she stepped into that ballroom, wearing a black dress, holding the arm of Lucienne Moretti, a Mafia boss, powerful enough to make billionaires lower their eyes. And by the end of the night, her ex was in handcuffs. The camera pans through a freezing downpour, finding a shattered parking lot drowning in winter shadow. Stick with me, because you and I are about to watch a beautiful tragedy unfold. Elena stands trembling in the deluge, certain her former lover has stripped away her last ounce of dignity. Her absolute ruin is the exact moment. Lucienne Moretti, a syndicate kingpin draped in heavy charcoal wool, fixes his obsidian gaze upon her. The lesson here is simple. Sometimes the world shatters your quiet existence just to drop an empire into your hands. Only minutes before, under the sick fluorescent hum of a grocery store, this 26-year-old girl was counting copper pennies, desperate to save $2 on cereal, while eviction notices burned in her empty pockets. The lens focuses tightly on her trembling fingers. It is not the freezing draft shaking her bones. It is the hollow exhaustion of pulling back-to-back shifts at a diner that pays in loose silver, where tips cannot even buy bus fare home. It is a slow, quiet death of the spirit. Remember this simple life lesson: you cannot possibly bloom if the soil holding your roots is laced with poison. Elena has no energy left to even dream. But as the camera tracks her turning the corner by the bruised produce, the sound drops out entirely. Her heart simply stops. Standing 20 feet away is Grayson Vale, 6 feet and 2 inches of trust fund arrogance, draped in cashmere that costs more than she earns in a year. His arm is hooked securely around a blonde heiress, dripping in cold, heavy diamonds. A violent wave of nausea hits her so hard she nearly collapses against the scuffed linoleum. The camera watches from the shadows as she tries to fade backward, desperate to vanish before he notices. But in a true tragedy, fate never grants mercy. Grayson calls her name, his voice echoing with a thick, theatrical layer of surprise. He saw her first. Every survival instinct in her exhausted body screams to run, yet she turns around, carving an agonizingly fragile smile onto her pale face. Grayson bridges the gap with the slow swagger of a man who has never been told no. He drags his gleaming new prize forward, his dead eyes slowly raking over Elena's faded denim and the tragic metal safety pin, holding her frayed coat together. The lesson here is absolute. You must never let a ghost from your past see you bleed. The lazy way he mentions, she looks exactly the same, is a masterclass in psychological cruelty. The shot zeroes in on Elena gripping her cheap plastic basket until her knuckles turn white. She quietly replies that some things change, while others remain trapped in time. A wicked shadow crosses Grayson's arrogant smile as he pulls his new prize closer. He introduces Victoria Ashford, effortlessly erasing his 3 years with Elena as a meaningless afterthought. Victoria extends a manicured hand, wearing the hollow, practiced smile of the elite. When Elena shakes it, her blistered, coffee-burned fingers scrape painfully against Victoria's flawless skin. The humiliation is thick. But remember this life lesson: those deep calluses only prove you are a true survivor in a world that refused to carry you. Elena forces out a hollow congratulations. The camera pushes in slowly as the oblivious bride chatters endlessly about their upcoming wedding, completely blind to the suffocating tension in the aisle. Grayson smoothly cuts her off, debossed about their 500 elite guests, his predatory eyes locked dead on Elena. Twisting the blade, he brags about the expensive French caterer they could never afford, back in their tiny apartment. You and I both know the only way to win against a monster is to walk away entirely. But Grayson is relentless. He actually has the twisted nerve to invite her to their engagement party. Victoria shifts awkwardly on her heels, but he just talks right over her. The lesson is dark, but necessary. Cruel people will always treat your quiet, desperate agony like their own personal entertainment. Elena feels her fragile smile finally starting to break. Right there, in that stifling, fluorescent-lit aisle, the audio muffles as something deep inside, her chest, finally cracks. Listening to the man who ruined her gloat about his flawless new reality completely hollows her out. She tries to salvage some grace, quietly murmuring that her schedule is just too packed. Grayson's smirk darkens into something genuinely sinister. He asks what could possibly demand her time, openly mocking the grueling diner shifts that barely keep her breathing. Victoria stands frozen in tense silence, realizing she is witnessing a public execution, not a reunion. Grayson leans in close, dropping his tone to a vicious whisper. Pay close attention to this life lesson. True character is always revealed when someone holds the absolute upper hand. He murmurs she is just ashamed to be buying cheap food while he rules the world. The breath vanishes from her lungs. Grayson delivers his fatal strike, dragging her secret dream of becoming a writer right into the unforgiving light. He coldly reminds her of his old warning, stating that artistic dreams are a luxury reserved strictly for the wealthy. It is an act of pure, calculated violence. The camera catches her eyes burning with unshed tears, but her jaw tightens as she refuses to let a single drop fall in his presence. Tossing out the party details, he commands her to come witness what real triumph looks like, then turns his back. Hear this life lesson clearly. You must never let a miserable soul dictate the true value of your spirit. Numb and completely broken, she floats through the checkout line, paying with handfuls of loose dimes, before pushing through the heavy glass doors into a freezing November storm. The freezing rain instantly soaks through the frayed threads of her thin coat. The scene is shot from a desolate angle as her trembling hands fumble with rusted keys. Her vision blurs with hot tears until she cannot even find the lock. Then, the universe delivers the final blow. Her front tire is completely flat. Staring at her battered car in the furious storm, her exhausted spirit finally caves. She survived the agonizing humiliation, but being stranded in the dark with cheap cereal and the ghost of his laughter is the moment her soul actually fractures. She slides down the wet metal door, sobbing into her icy palms. This is a painful life lesson sometimes. You must let yourself break entirely, so the pieces can be forged into iron. Through the heavy, blinding rain, a dark, velvet voice casually points out that she is bleeding. She slowly looks up. The man towering before her does not belong in this desolate, washed-out world. The street lamp catches him as a massive shadow, draped in a bespoke charcoal suit that whispers of dangerous, uncalculated power. He possesses a sharp, merciless jawline you only hear about in midnight rumors of the underground. His pitch-black eyes study Elena like a tragic, beautiful puzzle he is suddenly obsessed with solving. Choking on her own tears, she croaks out that she is perfectly fine. She wipes her freezing face, only to realize he is right. Her palm is sliced open, bleeding freely from the rusted car door. He states softly that sitting wounded in the freezing mud is far from fine. Listen to this life lesson. Acknowledging your own absolute ruin is the only way to start climbing out of the dark. Elena scoffs bitterly, forcing her trembling legs to stand. The camera tilts wildly as the faded yellow lines of the parking lot rush up to meet her. Elena does not even realize she is blacking out until powerful, unyielding hands snatch her right out of the freezing air. The mysterious stranger anchors her fragile frame against his solid chest. His deep voice vibrates with a sudden, dark fury as he demands to know the last time she actually ate a solid meal. The anger is heavy, yet none of it is directed at her. She weakly tries to shove his arms away, but her limbs are completely useless. He reads the tragic map of her ruined body instantly, the malnutrition, the shock, the bleeding skin. You and I have both lived through moments where we pretended to be invincible. The lesson here is profound. Sometimes, you must completely collapse before you let someone remind you that your life actually matters. Barely conscious, she murmurs against the heavy rain that she had a single piece of toast yesterday. The camera frames the stranger from a low angle as his jaw clenches with enough quiet, restrained violence to shatter glass. In a move of pure dominance, he simply flicks his wrist, Out of the shadows, two towering men in midnight suits materialize like phantoms, looking capable of tearing the city apart. One smoothly confiscates her scattered groceries from the mud. Her buried survival instincts finally flare into sheer panic. She weakly yanks her arm toward her chest, demanding to know who he thinks he is. He leans in close, dropping the name Lucien Moretti like a heavy anchor into her soul, and commands her to get into his waiting car. Here is a vital life lesson: always trust your intuition, but never let a bruised ego stop you from grabbing a lifeline when you are drowning. A ruthless underworld kidnapper. The thought flashes across Elena's eyes as this towering kingpin steps closer, but the sheer gravity of his dark stare pins her to the wet pavement, paralyzing her urge to flee. Then, his low voice cuts through the rain with a revelation that shifts the entire narrative. He was watching. The camera closes in on his face as he reveals he saw her ex tear her down and watched her absorb the abuse because she believed she deserved it. Lucien knows she is teetering on the edge. He offers a terrifying choice: freeze in the mud with a broken car, or step into his shadowed world and be treated like a queen for one night. Look, you and I are going to unpack this together, because the lesson is vital. You never have to tolerate the cruelty others have programmed you to accept. Logic screams at her to run, but she stays completely frozen. The ghost of an engagement ring burns Elena's skin, mocking her beside the shredded tire. The freezing rain is relentless, yet this dangerously quiet man looks at her like she is the only breathing thing in the city. Come, he whispers into the storm. Listen, you and I know the fear of trusting a stranger, but sometimes a blind leap is the only way to rewrite a shattered life. She reaches out, and Lucien exhales a heavy breath. Their fingers brush. She feels the cold steel of his watch, and the brutal, jagged scars carving up his knuckles. Violence lives intimately in his hands. They slide into the cavernous warmth of his black sedan, the heavy door sealing them inside, like a vault. Sinking into the leather, her fragile voice trembles. Where are we going? Bathed in the dim glow of the cabin, Lucien types rapid messages. He calmly announces they are heading to his home for bandages before she faints. Elena grips her jacket, clinging to the last shreds of her pride, insisting she is fine. He does not blink at her lie. The air pressure in the car shifts, becoming heavy and suffocating. He pockets his phone and demands the name of the man who broke her. His voice drops into a terrifying, icy register. She whispers that Grayson Vale threw her away for a woman with old money. Remember this truth: true value is never measured by a fancy pedigree, and the right people will see your worth instantly. Lucien leans back into the shadows. Better, he repeats, the word dripping from his mouth, with absolute, unadulterated disgust. Elena's voice shakes as she admits Grayson invited her to his engagement party just to watch her bleed. Lucien goes dead quiet. In his dangerous world, absolute silence is a terrifying reaction. He leans in and softly demands the full name. Grayson Alexander Vale. A brutal switch flips in his dark eyes. He calls an associate, ordering a ruthless background check, every buried sin on his desk by dawn. Elena panics, her heart hammering. Why do this for a stranger? Lucien looks out the rain-streaked window. I am making sure nobody hurts you again. You and I both know how the world works. When someone breaks your spirit for sport, karma always comes back to collect, often wearing a tailored suit. The heavy sedan finally glides to a stop outside a towering skyscraper. They step into a world of untouchable wealth. Silent Dorman Bow, projecting heavy, unspoken power. Lucien guides her to a sprawling penthouse that feels like a cold modern art museum, framed by floor to ceiling glass and brooding paintings. He presses her down onto a plush sofa, retrieves a medical kit, and without hesitation, the billionaire drops to his knees. He cleans her bleeding hand with steady, practiced precision. She whispers that he is surprisingly good at this. His dark, exhausted eyes flick up to meet hers. People in my life have a terrible tendency to get hurt, he murmurs, his voice a low scrape. Let this sink in. Real strength is never about hoarding money. It is about a powerful man willing to kneel on the floor just to heal someone else's pain. When she finally asks how he makes his money, Lucien pauses. He pours 2 crystal glasses of amber liquor, ice clinking softly. Imports, exports, investments, he murmurs. I solve problems. We know exactly what violence hides behind those words. He sits close, his dark presence demanding the unedited truth, and Elena's dam shatters. She spills her secrets into the quiet night, revealing how she grew up dirt poor and how Grayson slowly poisoned her mind. He convinced her that her writing dreams were pathetic, demanding she be grateful. He even looked her way. We can all learn from this tragedy. Never let a toxic partner shrink your world or convince you your passions are worthless. She lost her very soul trying to hold on to a man who only wanted to break her. Grayson dumped her the same week she lost her scholarship. A calculated, crushing blow. Lucien sits like a stone statue, his face unreadable. He sets his glass down with a sharp thud and drops a bomb. She is going to that engagement party on Saturday, and he will be the man on her arm. Grayson will see the woman he discarded and choke on his regret. Elena panics. Why would a billionaire care about her shattered life? Lucien reaches out, dragging a rough thumb across her tear-stained cheek. The moment I saw you crying, I recognized something deep inside you, he murmurs, and I never let go of things that belong to me. Remember this lesson. Sometimes the absolute greatest revenge is showing up, looking untouchable, and living your best life. The trap is officially set. Lucien flashes a wolfish smile. The game has just begun, he whispers. Sunlight spills over the bed the next morning. Elena wakes on a mattress that feels like a cloud. Then yesterday's trauma crashes over her, the rain, the shredded tire, and Lucien's intense stare burning into her soul. She sits up, taking in the sweeping city view. Her ruined clothes are gone, replaced by an expensive silk robe smelling of his cologne. Her phone buzzes with frantic texts from her roommate. Elena types a quick lie, unable to explain. She slept in a kingpin's fortress. She wanders into the bathroom and gasps at the endless marble. Keep this truth close. Sometimes hitting absolute rock bottom is just the universe clearing the slate to completely upgrade your reality. The bathroom is a masterpiece of dark stone, stocked with products bought exclusively for her. Wrapped in heavy silk, Elena follows the aroma of coffee into the kitchen. There stands Lucien. Tailored slacks, a crisp shirt rolled up over his scarred forearms. He looks devastating. A fiercely possessive shadow crosses his features. You are awake, he murmurs. Good, sit, it is an absolute command. Elena glues herself to a bar stool. He slides a steaming plate of food in front of her, a meal she has not been able to afford in months. Eat, he orders softly. We will talk after. She takes a shaky, perfect bite. I want you to remember this truth. True power is proven by how a person treats you when you have absolutely nothing to offer them in return. Everything in his world operates with terrifying perfection. Elena eats in silence, feeling his heavy, unblinking gaze. When she finishes, he casually drops a bomb. He ordered her ruined car fully rebuilt. New tires, perfect engine, delivered today. Elena gasps, whispering he cannot do that. I can, and I did, he replies with absolute authority. Then he demands her address to pay off her rent. Give it to me willingly, or I will find it myself, he warns softly. Elena slams her cup down, begging him to stop this twisted game. Lucien glides around the marble counter like a stalking wolf, leaning in close. You are drowning, Elena, he murmurs, and I am offering a lifeline, the hard truth we must face. Pride is completely useless when your ship is actively sinking. Just take the life raft. Elena's voice breaks. Why do this for a stranger? The silence grows heavy. Lucien looks away, his ruthless mask slipping to reveal an old wound. He watched his mother die from a treatable illness because she was too proud to beg. By the time he built his empire, it was too late. He lifts his dark eyes to Elena. You have that exact same pride, he says, choosing to suffer in silence. I will not watch you destroy yourself. I am not your mother, Elena whispers. Lucien reaches out, his scarred hands cupping her face with devastating gentleness. No, he agrees softly. You are something else entirely. Something I never expected to find. The lesson here is profound. The thickest walls we build are often broken down by one unexpected moment of raw human vulnerability. Instead of pulling away, Elena leans into his scarred palm, finding the only true warmth she has felt in years. Lucienne brushes her cheek, laying out the plan. They are crashing Grayson's engagement party to show that fool his mistake. Elena calls the idea pure madness. Lucienne smiles, a predatory curve of his lips. "I built an empire on calculated risks," he murmurs, "and you are a gamble worth taking." What follows is the wildest week of her life. Elite tailors arrive with custom gowns. He texts daily to ensure she eats. Her car is returned pristine, with rare books waiting on the seat. We must remember this lesson. Never settle for a man who treats you like a backup option when someone else is ready to worship you like an absolute masterpiece. Let us watch this unfold. Those books were first editions, the exact novels Elena pawned to survive when her life collapsed. She touches the covers, forgetting how to breathe. The next day, massive floral arrangements flood her cafe, causing a total frenzy. She calls him, but he answers with silence. Instead, Lucienne walks right through the front door. He stands there in a suit worth more than the building, his dark gravity crushing the room. Her manager drops a tray in terror as Lucienne casually orders a black coffee. Elena's hands shake as she pours, begging him to stop this public display. He just smirks, playing the innocent customer. A lesson to carry with you. When someone truly hears the pain, hidden in the things you barely whisper, hold them close and never let them go. Harsh cafe lights cast heavy shadows across Elena's pale face as she whispers that his presence is crushing her spirit. Lucian does not blink, smoothly sliding a crisp $100 bill across the scarred counter. "Keep the change," he murmurs, his tone dripping with cold wealth. "Saturday night. I will pick you up at 6. Wear the black dress with the open back." She freezes, a tremor shaking her frame. How could he know? He stares straight into the tragic wreckage of her soul. "I know everything, Elena, and soon I will map every shadow you hide." He steps away, leaving the room suffocating in his violent wake. When her roommate demands the bitter truth, Elena lies. The absolute life lesson of the dark is simple. True terrifying power never shouts. It is always delivered in the softest whispers. Jessica paces the suffocating apartment, relentlessly demanding the name of the phantom, buying the books. Exhausted, Elena surrenders her phone. A harsh blue glow illuminates Jessica's horrified face. "You are bringing a dangerous stranger to your toxic ex's party," she whispers. "Does he know you have nothing?" Elena nods slowly, staring into the dark rain. He knows she is drowning, yet he chooses to pull her out. Jessica delivers a bleeding truth. Men with violent power never save you for free. They always collect their tragic debts. Yet Elena only remembers the lingering brush of his thumb against her jaw. The midnight life lesson here is profound. Trusting another broken soul is an agonizing risk, especially when their sudden mercy feels like an inescapable, beautifully designed trap. Elena remembers how Lucian studied her like a tragic, fragile artifact. "I do not know what he wants," she whispers. "But tonight we find out." Saturday arrives with the heavy weight of a looming storm. She paces the floor, primal instincts screaming to run. But the dress changes everything. Black silk slides over her skin, leaving her spine entirely bare. In the mirror, the broken girl is dead. A woman prepared for absolute war stares back. At exactly 6, her phone illuminates. "I am downstairs." Her hands tremble violently. Jessica watches from the shadows, whispering that she looks ready to turn a man's heart to ash. "That is the point," Elena replies softly. "The profound life lesson is this. Sometimes you must wear the dark armor of a villain to finally reclaim the power stolen from your spirit. Stay with me, because you and I are walking right into the darkest shadows now. We are warned about men carrying destruction in their gaze, but here is a painful life lesson. The brightest danger signs are often tailored into the most ruthless suits." Elena knows Lucian could reduce her world to ash, yet she steps outside anyway. He waits beside a black sedan, a nightmare carved from the evening fog. His dark eyes track her before his low voice shatters the quiet. "You are stunning," he murmurs. She tries to build a wall, but he smiles with lethal intent. He guides her to the car, his hand pressing firmly against her bare spine in a silent, absolute claim. The neon city blurs past as he barks rapid Italian into his phone, flooding the tight space with the cold, undeniable weight of his violent world. His voice echoes in the car, cold as winter steel. Ending the call, his predatory gaze locks onto her. He asks if she is ready. Elena swallows her panic, admitting her terror. He reaches out, gently tracing her trembling knuckles. A midnight life lesson for us all. Surround yourself with rare souls who remind you of your hidden strength. Luz whispers that Grayson, the man who broke her, is about to realize his catastrophic mistake. Grayson thrives on making her shrink, but Lucian tightens his grip. Tonight you are with me, he vows, and no one will dare diminish you. Her breath catches. They arrive at the Rosewood Hotel, a towering monument of cold marble. With his palm burning fiercely against her bare spine, they step through the heavy doors dos space, and the breathless room simply stops to stare. Murmurs ripple through the elite crowd like slow poison. Under the glowing chandeliers, people whisper the feared name of Lucian Moretti. As they step onto the floor, the oxygen grows heavy. Laughter dies. Powerful men turn pale, their hands shaking. Lucian remains immovable, parting the sea of elites like a dark king. Then the ghost appears. Grayson stands by the bar, wearing the arrogant smirk that once left Elena sobbing. But the second his eyes lock onto her, his false kingdom turns to dust. Confusion morphs into sheer dread when he recognizes the apex predator at her side. A profound life lesson. Karma always collects its devastating debts when you are completely unprepared. Grayson stumbles forward, choking on his own words, just as Lucian flashes a beautifully lethal smile and extends his hand. Grayson trembles as his hand meets Lucian's unforgiving grip. He stammers a weak greeting. Lucian's lips curve into a dark smile. I could not ignore the invitation, he purrs. Victoria glides over, dripping with artificial sweetness, trying to mock Elena's date. This is the exact moment Lucian pulls the pin on the grenade. Actually, he says, with chilling calm, we are engaged. A soft gasp escapes Elena, but his fingers press a silent warning into her bare waist. Grayson looks shattered, sputtering that they only broke up 6 months ago. Lucian's eyes turn pitch black. Your careless loss is my extraordinary gain. The ultimate life lesson? Never let the monsters who broke you see you bleed. Burying her panic, Elena perfectly adopts the serene mask of a tragic queen, playing right into the devil's hands. Elena forces her hammering heart to steady and softly agrees. Victoria's painted smile fractures like cheap glass. Desperate for dominance, she sneers that Elena is just pouring coffee for a living. Grayson stands paralyzed, staring at the underworld king. Lucian cuts through the cruelty with surgical precision. She was working there, he corrects smoothly, but now she writes full-time, and I am backing her brilliance. He notes that elite publishers are waging war over her manuscript. Behind her calm gaze, Elena is suffocating. She has not penned a single word since Grayson shattered her soul. The tragic life lesson is clear. Sometimes, you must wear a beautiful, terrifying lie just to survive the room. Grayson chokes out a weak question, and Elena leans fully into the intoxicating fantasy. The vengeance tastes like dangerously sweet wine. Grayson swallows hard, stammering a pathetic lie that he believed in her talent. Her old sorrow hardens into steel. She weaponizes his past cruelties. You told me writing was a pathetic fantasy for the rich, she whispered, slicing the air. The silence is deafening. Grayson flounders, muttering excuses about facing reality. Lucian's voice drops to a deadly hum. You were not realistic, he corrects softly. You were just being small. The profound life lesson? Never let a hollow soul convince you. Your dreams are too heavy to carry. A photographer breaks the tension. Victoria drags Grayson into a desperate pose. When the lens turns to Elena, panic flares, but Lucian's arm tightens like a vault. We would be delighted, he purrs. His hand claims her waist, gently tilting her chin to the light, playing the dark lover to perfection. Smile, Lucian whispers against her ear. Show that fool what he threw away. Elena forces an agonizing smile. The flash blinds them. Grayson looks like a man staring into his own grave. The evening blurs into an endless sea of clinking crystal. Lucien never lets her go. His hand remains a burning brand on her bare back, a silent warning that she belongs to the king. A quiet life lesson. Real confidence is an armor you must forge yourself, even while your bones shake. Elena wears the mask beautifully. Later, suffocating under the heavy gaze of the room, she escapes into the cold marble bathroom for oxygen, but the shadows always follow. The door clicks open. Victoria steps inside. Her fake sweetness is gone. Applying red lipstick like war paint, she sneers that being a boss's toy is quite the promotion. Elena grips the icy sink, bracing for the bleed. Let us step into this room together. You and I can practically feel the freezing air, radiating tension. Elena holds her ground, her reflection pale but tragically defiant. She calmly asks if there is a problem. Victoria glares through the glass, her smile dripping with venom. She demands to know how a girl with empty pockets snagged the most dangerous man on the East Coast. When Elena whispers that maybe he just values her soul, Victoria unleashes a hollow, bitter laugh. She leans in close, warning that men like Lucien do not know how to love. They merely collect beautiful, broken things as trophies. She calls Elena a temporary project. A stranger walks in, instantly feels the hostility, and turns right back around. Here is a vital truth for you to take away tonight. Miserable people will always try to drag you down into the icy depths of their own darkness. The harsh light catches the tremor in Elena's hands as she grips the cold marble sink. She tries to lock away the panic, asking Victoria if she is finished. The socialite offers a razor-thin smile, slipping away and leaving Elena in toxic silence. In the sprawling ballroom, Lucien stands amidst a high-stakes negotiation. But the moment his gaze catches her fractured reflection, the elite crowd ceases to exist. He crosses the floor and demands the unvarnished truth. The lesson here is absolute. There is utter futility in lying to a man who has made a thorough study of your breathing. As her defenses crumble and the cruel words spill out, his heavy hand anchors her trembling chin. He forces her to meet his dark stare, refusing to let her drown. Look closely with me, because the power dynamic in this golden room is violently shifting. Lucien stares into her eyes, dissects Victoria's hollow existence, and confesses a raw truth. Finding Elena weeping in that desolate lot fundamentally rewired his mind. Now his singular focus is to eradicate any source of her pain. "You are mine," he whispers, the declaration carrying the inescapable pull of gravity. Before her mind can process his dark possessiveness, absolute chaos erupts. The heavy mahogany doors are thrown open, and federal agents flood the venue. Their grim presence freezes the glittering crowd in sheer terror. The life lesson here is profound. Never fail to cherish the rare individual who stops to honor your tears, even as the rest of society marches blindly forward. The agent's voice fractures the silence as he calls for Grayson. The arrogance drains from Grayson's face, leaving only pale dread. He stammers through pathetic excuses, but officers secure cold steel cuffs around his wrists for massive financial fraud. The elegant room shatters. Victoria wails hysterically, while Grayson's father shakes with fury. Elena remains paralyzed, anchored only when Lucien leans into her ear. "I told you," he murmurs, his tone chillingly smooth. "No one hurts you," and walks away. Her blood runs cold as she studies his dark smirk. The terrifying reality clicks into place. He orchestrated this entire downfall. Always, karma inevitably collects its debts, especially when a relentless man guarantees the delivery. Elena struggles for breath, staring at her abuser's ruin. She asks how he managed such a surgical takedown. Lucien stands tall, chaotic police lights washing over his face. He casually explains he used his network to expose Grayson's sins, forcing a federal collapse. "You destroyed his life?" she asks. His reasoning is a terrifying blend of romance and sheer ruin. He confirms it was solely because Grayson dared to make her cry. Disrespecting her required absolute annihilation. She calls him insane, and he smirks, agreeing he is exactly her brand of madness. As her ex is dragged away, Lucien watches like a dark sovereign. The life lesson here is stark. If someone is willing to burn the world down to keep you warm, you must be certain you can survive, standing in their flames. Amid the panic of the ballroom, Lucien stands as Elena's only anchor. Trembling, she whispers a desperate plea for space. He slowly loosens his grip, delivering a dangerously quiet ultimatum. She may walk away tonight, but she has exactly 3 days before he claims her. Her logic screams to run, but her exhausted body leans back into his warmth. When she questions the timeline, his composed facade fractures. 3 days is the limit his sanity can endure without her. He brushes a curl from her pale face, moved that she still sees the man beneath the monster. She weeps, entirely overwhelmed by his dark devotion. Remember this life lesson: sometimes the figures society paints as absolute nightmares are the only protectors fierce enough to guard your fragile peace. You and I must pause and survey the wreckage of this room. Elena points out the madness of annihilating a man's life in front of 500 elites over a vendetta. Lucien harbors zero regret. He pulls her flush against his chest, letting the calm rhythm of his heart answer her panic. He speaks with brutal honesty, admitting his empire was forged in violence, but her presence makes him crave redemption. Outside, police sirens wail and camera flashes burst like a storm. As she surrenders to his 3-day ultimatum, he claims her lips in a devastating kiss that shatters her remaining defenses. Here is a beautiful life lesson to carry with you. We often spend our lives sprinting away from chaos, only to collide with the exact storm our soul secretly craved all along. The haunting question is whether Elena possesses the fortitude to survive this ruthless affection. Instead of retreating to her apartment, she sits paralyzed, staring through the tinted glass of Lucien's black sedan. Her reality is fracturing. She just watched her abusive ex dragged away in chains. The emotional whiplash is staggering. 7 days ago, she wept over a blown tire in a desolate lot. Now, she steps into a shadow-drenched penthouse, alongside a criminal architect. As he silently pours 2 glasses of dark whiskey, she swallows hers in a single desperate gulp. This paints a profound life lesson for our paths. A seemingly minor inconvenience, like a simple breakdown on a quiet street, can act as the fierce catalyst that violently reshapes your entire destiny. The rush of adrenaline fades, letting the crushing weight of the evening collapse upon her. Elena shatters the quiet air, her voice vibrating with panic, as she sarcastically praises him for orchestrating felonies on her behalf. She slams her crystal glass against the wood, furious that he dared to play God. Yet Lucien stands completely unbothered. He traps her gaze, declaring a hard truth: if given the choice, she would have swallowed her misery to protect a monster from his ruin. Stepping into her orbit, he traces her jaw, whispering that her extreme selflessness is a fatal flaw. Let us extract a crucial life lesson. From this tension, you must stop, setting your own soul on fire simply to provide warmth for those who continually freeze you out. Let us examine the twisted justice unfolding in this dark room. Grayson was stealing millions, and his downfall was inevitable. Yet, Lucien accelerated a complete collapse for one terrifying reason. Grayson caused a tear to fall from Elena's eye. He dismantled a financial empire purely because its king dared to humiliate her. There is a powerful life lesson woven into this madness. Never allow another human being to shrink your spirit, for your inherent value is beyond measure. Suffocating under this dark devotion, Elena demands to leave, but Lucien's cold demeanor melts into genuine concern. It is 2 a.m. She is shivering from fading adrenaline, and her apartment offers zero comfort. He quietly offers his guest room, and honestly, she lacks the strength to wage another war tonight. The camera follows as Lucien guides her to the guest suite. He offers a heavy dress shirt before retreating into the shadows. He demands nothing, offering only respect. Yet left alone in the silence, sleep evades her. She stares into the dark, caught in a vicious identity fracture. How did she become a woman draped in silk, standing beside a crime boss as her abuser was dragged away in chains? The paralyzing revelation is the dark satisfaction she felt witnessing his ruin. She secretly craved that retribution. This brings us to an essential life lesson. We must often stare directly into the terrifying depths of our own shadow to uncover our truest desires. As pale dawn breaks, she wanders out, finding Lucien armored in a sharp suit, commanding the morning over bitter espresso. Lucien lifts his gaze, tracking her quiet entrance. She stands exposed, swallowed by his shirt and stripped of makeup. Yet his expression hardens into a fiercely possessive look that sends a spike through her pulse. He slides a steaming mug across the marble, the silence wrapping around them like a wire. Breaking beneath the pressure, Elena demands the brutal truth. Why obsess over a struggling barista when he could have any elite socialite? Lucien anchors her with his focus. He explains that the elite look at his empire and see wealth, but she looked at his power and was beautifully unimpressed. "I was terrified," she whispers. This brings us to an essential life lesson in a world drowning in calculated facades. Raw, unfiltered authenticity is the rarest treasure you can possess. You and I must unpack this together, because the emotional shift is incredibly heavy. Lucien refuses to sugarcoat the poison in his veins. Leaning closer, he confesses a chilling reality: she is entirely right to fear him. He admits his empire was built on shattered bones, making him the monster mothers warn children about. Yet, moving with a predator's grace, he closes the distance. Threading his fingers through her hair, he whispers that her soul makes him ache for redemption. He desperately wants to be a man worth keeping. He draws her into a slow, devastating kiss. Her instincts scream to flee, but she surrenders to his darkness. This leaves us with a profound life lesson sometimes. Taking a reckless leap into the terrifying unknown is the only way to finally wake up. Let us step into this scene together. The camera pushes in slowly. The air in the room is suffocating, broken only by Elena catching her breath. Lucien leans close, his forehead resting against hers in the dim light. He gives her exactly 3 days to accept the monster hiding beneath his tailored suit. The next few days blur into a fever dream. His gentle texts arrive on schedule, clashing violently with his dark reality. Meanwhile, her office is in an uproar as photos of her ex in handcuffs flood the screens. Then, Jessica marches in, her laptop glowing. The lesson here is simple. We all paint over the red flags when a fantasy feels safe, but reality always collects its due. Jessica spins the screen, and the fragile illusion finally shatters. Lucien is no ordinary businessman. The harsh blue light of the monitor washes over Elena. Jessica points at the screen, her hand visibly shaking. The camera lingers on the digital graveyard, detailing laundered millions and rivals who simply vanished. In the photos, Lucien stands like an architect of ruin beside desperate politicians. Jessica screams that Elena just invited a crime lord into her life. Is she a lover, a project, or just his next tragedy? Elena shrinks back, whispering that he would never hurt her. But when asked how she knows that, her silence is absolute. It is a terrifying truth to face, but the best friends are the ones brave enough to drag you out of your blind spots. Elena stares at the floor, feeling the heavy, fatal gravity pulling her toward a man wrapped entirely in darkness. Jessica paces the room, her voice cracking with panic. She warns that predators like Lucien do not fall in love. They collect fragile things, drain their warmth, and leave nothing but ash behind. She begs Elena to wake up, terrified of identifying her body when the novelty fades. The scene cuts to Wednesday morning. A sleek package sits on Elena's doorstep in the pale dawn. Her trembling fingers open it to reveal a beautifully bound manuscript. It is the exact collection of college stories her ex forced her to delete. Grayson mocked her dreams, but Lucien reached into the void and brought them back to life. The lesson here is profound. The right person will fiercely guard your fading spark, rather than ever trying to extinguish it. A crisp note rests on top, a silent and heavy promise. The camera pulls back, showing Elena sitting on the floor. Pages scatter around her as she reads the worlds she once built. The reality hits her like a physical blow. Her writing is beautiful. Grayson had dismantled her spirit, burying her passion under his demands. He crushed her dreams and she let him. But holding this proof of her talent, A hot rage ignites in her chest. She dials Lucian, her knuckles white. When she demands to know how he dug up her past, his deep voice hums with dark amusement. He replies that he employs thorough people. She calls it a violation. He answers with a low laugh. Never let a bitter soul convince you of your own mediocrity. Your true potential is always waiting in the shadows, ready to be pulled back into the light. Tears stream down Elena's face as she speaks into the phone, furious that she forgot her own worth. The bitter irony is suffocating. It took a ruthless criminal to make her see her value again. Lucian's dark laugh vibrates through the receiver. He praises her anger as a weapon, asking how she plans to use it. Elena's voice trembles as she asks what happens if she surrenders entirely to his world. His answer is pure, cold authority. She will take his penthouse, quit her job, and write while he burns the world to keep her safe. She calls it a cold transaction. His response drops like thunder. Every human connection is a trade. It only matters what you are willing to spend. Sometimes, to truly live, you have to strike a match and watch your old life burn completely to the ground. Elena grips the steering wheel, making a desperate move. She refuses the sanitized penthouse and demands his true sanctuary. The camera follows her car deep into the night, arriving at a towering stone estate that oozes old-world dread. Armed guards wave her through the iron gates without blinking. Lucian waits on the massive stone steps. Dressed in dark denim, his relaxed posture only highlights his dangerous grace. For a fleeting second, her courage crumbles under his piercing stare. He offers a slow, devastating smile, whispering that he never thought she would walk into the dark to find him. It is easy to judge from a safe distance. But remember this simple truth: stepping out of the familiar cages we build is often the only way to find out who we are truly meant to be. Lucian waits for her nerve to shatter, but Elena holds her ground, claiming the night is young. A blade-sharp smirk crosses his face as he guides her inside. The estate is a monument to violence, but the inner rooms reveal a tragic vulnerability. The camera pans over worn leather armchairs, scattered classic novels, and framed photos of a life long dead. He leads her into the absolute silence of his study. Then comes the sound. The heavy deadbolt slides into place with a sickening click. Elena's pulse hammers at her throat. He locks his eyes onto hers, stating that the secrets in this room never leave it. He opens a hidden safe and hands her a heavy folder. We often beg the universe for the brutal truth, only to realize our fragile souls are entirely unprepared for the weight of it. Stick with me here, because the ground is about to give way beneath her feet. Elena slowly opens the folder, revealing a literal nightmare on paper. It is a terrifyingly precise record of her life. Bank tapes, receipts, and glossy surveillance photos of her drinking coffee 6 months ago. Long before they supposedly met, Lucian was hunting her. The reason is a punch to the gut. Her ex was stealing cartel money, and Lucian thought Elena had the ledger. The lesson echoing in this silent room is vicious. The savior offering to hand you the world is often the exact architect of your destruction. Elena's chest heaves as the agonizing reality sets in. Every lingering touch, every soft word in the dark, it was all a clinical calculated trap to destroy the man who hurt her. Elena stumbles backward, shrinking away from his silhouette as if the air around him is poison. She screams, hurling the heavy papers across the polished floor. Months of her stolen life scatter like dead leaves. The sickening puzzle finally clicks. The financial rescue, the magical return of her career, it was all a web spun to make her reliant on him. Bitter tears of shame streak her face. She actually believed fate had given her a miracle. But then, Lucian's stone-cold mask breaks. His shoulders drop. In a voice like crushed gravel, he swears that while it started as a mission, the second he truly saw her, the plan burned away. The real tragedy here. The most devastating lies are always the ones we tell ourselves, and the puppet master had tripped over his own strings. How does a heart survive a blow this heavy? Elena collapses against the wall, weeping openly. She accuses him of staging a sick play, mocking the broken girl who fell into his trap. But Lucian's voice cuts through her panic. He closes the distance. His eyes are dark, swirling with agonizing sincerity. He swears he never took pleasure in her pain. Then he delivers the confession that changes everything. Tracking her started as business, but it morphed into a desperate obsession. He studied her fractured soul, because his ruined mind could not grasp how a woman beaten down by the world still carried such hope. There is a deep truth we must remember. Genuine kindness has a massive gravity. Her gentle light was strong enough to completely shatter a warlord's defenses. The last wall between them crumbles, leaving the boss exposed. He admits to pulling the strings of her life, even destroying her ex to clear her path. Then, the armored kingpin drops his guard. With a voice bleeding raw emotion, he tells her he loves her. He knows his methods were insane. He knows he burned her trust to the ground, but he swears to spend his life rebuilding it. Every instinct in Elena's body screams at her to run for the door, but the human heart is a chaotic thing. She wipes her eyes, stands her ground, and demands to see the rest of the files in his safe. The hardest lesson of betrayal is this. Sometimes, we willingly drink the rest of the poison, just to understand the cure. Lucian's jaw tightens, but he slowly hands them over. Let us look at these pages together, because what Elena finds in that safe is pure, cold terror. She flips through the heavy stack, her fingers trembling. The camera reveals detailed interrogation transcripts. Not of her, but of every person she has ever known. Her boss at the coffee shop, her old roommate, even the estranged mother she has not spoken to in 5 years. But the most devastating document sits at the bottom, a clinical psychological profile of Elena herself. It maps out her deepest traumas and abandonment issues, explaining exactly how a powerful man playing the hero could manipulate her. The truth hits hard. Our deepest, most unhealed wounds are the exact places where the wrong people will attach their strings. Her tragic realization is finally complete. Let us examine this scene closely, for you and I are witnessing the total collapse of a carefully constructed reality. Elena stares at the physical playbook in her trembling hands. It is hard proof that the man she loved viewed her heart not as a sanctuary, but as a battlefield. Every perfectly timed gift was a calculated strike against her deepest insecurities. Her scream rips through the room, ringing off the cold marble of his sprawling estate. Lucian stands perfectly rigid, a terrifying portrait of toxic control struggling to defend his methods. He claims the deceit gave way to genuine affection, that he truly watered the seeds of her dreams. But the lesson here is unavoidable. Manipulation always poisons the well of trust, and no matter how sweet the water may seem, the roots below are rotting. Her voice shatters under the weight of an impossible question. How can any trust exist with a man who mastered the art of psychological warfare? A suffocating silence descends upon the room. Lucian, the hardened architect of his own misery, looks decimated. He swears he would reduce the entire world to ash, just to protect her, declaring his love as his only truth. Elena simply offers a hollow, dry laugh. This powerful syndicate boss is begging his own victim for grace. She turns her back on this agonizing theater, walking toward the heavy oak door without a single glance back. It brings us to a harsh but necessary lesson. A toxic love, no matter how fiercely its fire burns in the dead of night, will always leave you standing completely alone in a pile of cold ashes. Lucian shatters the silence with a revelation that halts her momentum. He promises to let her walk away, but unveils the terrifying reality of her former partner. Grayson was not merely swindling investors. He was siphoning millions from the ruthless Calabrese syndicate. Elena freezes, her hand lingering on the doorknob, demanding to know how this involves her. Lucian explains the grim mathematics of the underworld. The mob assumes she holds the map to the stolen money. They will hunt her down and erase her existence. This dark realization serves as a profound lesson. The company you keep always leaves a permanent mark on your future. What appeared to be the obsessive shadow of a stalker was actually a deeply twisted attempt to shield her from the real monsters. We arrive at a crossroads where the tension is suffocating. Lucian states plainly that walking out that door terminates his protection. He cannot save a soul that refuses salvation. Elena vibrates with helpless rage as the illusion of free will dissolves. She must remain captive to a master manipulator or become prey for a cartel. The camera captures the defeat in her posture. Lucien does not sugarcoat his own toxicity. He admits he is a terrible sanctuary, yet he is the only barrier between her and the grave. She calls him a monster, though her mind recognizes the bleak truth. She cannot fight this war alone. It is a grim lesson to swallow. Sometimes, securing your survival means staring directly into the abyss and making a calculated pact with the devil you already know. Observe the brilliant psychological shift that happens here. Elena realizes she is not an equal partner in his eyes, but a project he wishes to mold. Refusing the role of a passive victim, she looks this dangerous underworld sovereign dead in the eye. She declares her absolute hatred for him, brutally stripping away any delusion of romance. Then she dictates the ironclad terms of her survival. She demands private quarters, full transparency into his financial empire, and total isolation. Lucien clenches his jaw, the friction of lost control evident in the tight lines of his face, yet he ultimately bows to her terms. This serves as a vital lesson. When your back is pushed against a cold wall, establishing strict boundaries becomes your absolute best armor against complete destruction. Elena continues the cold dismantling of his ego. She warns that if he ever attempts to pull her strings again, she will tear his empire down. Then comes the fatal strike. She forbids him from ever speaking of love. Those syllables are completely hollow, coming from a man who treated her trauma like a solvable puzzle. She walks away, realizing she has merely traded a nightmare for a gilded prison. Left alone, the stoic Dawn finally fractures, shattering a heavy glass against the wall in a fierce display of impotent rage. Elena retreats to the furthest bedroom, locking the door before she finally lets the bitter tears fall. This brings us to an essential lesson. Never let sweet words blind you to toxic actions, because true love will never require a tactical playbook to win your trusting heart. Understand this. Elena is not weeping for a worthless ex-boyfriend. She is mourning the illusion that this underworld figure actually saw the poetry in her soul. For 3 agonizing days, she eclipses herself in a darkened room, offering only cold silence whenever Lucien approaches. She desperately wishes to erase his shadow from her life. Yet, on the 4th morning, a shift occurs. She steps out into the cavernous mansion. The Dawn honors his word, watching from the periphery, like a ruined king mourning his fallen kingdom. She drifts into a sprawling library to seek solace. The lesson hidden in this quiet, cinematic sequence is profound. No matter how deeply your trust has been shattered, you must eventually open the door and step out of the darkness to reclaim your footing. Picture this scene with me. Elena seeks refuge among the vintage books of the Grand Library, tracing their covers to ground her mind. The silence is broken by measured footsteps. An elegant Italian matriarch materializes in the doorway, her dark eyes radiating underworld authority. Elena stiffens, stammering an apology, but the older woman glides forward with untouchable grace. Introducing herself as Bianca, Lucien's aunt, she drops a psychological bombshell. She notes Elena must be the rare woman who has her iron-fisted nephew, smashing artifacts like a lovesick teenager. The lesson here is undeniable. No matter how dangerous someone appears on the surface, encountering real love will always dismantle their heavy defenses and reduce them to a chaotic mess. Elena argues, her voice tight, that Lucien merely executed a calculated manipulation strategy. Aunt Bianca raises an eyebrow with the quiet authority of a queen and counters with precision. A syndicate boss does not lose sleep over ordinary targets. He does not shatter glass in blind frustration, and he never hands over the encryption keys to his empire. Elena recoils, deeply shaken. He actually sent the files? Bianca instructs her to check her messages, her tone turning grave. She admits Lucien built his violent kingdom on terror. Yet he has never truly loved, and that raw exposure terrifies him. The lesson here is profound. When a guarded individual hands you the absolute power to ruin them, that terrifying surrender, speaks far louder than the dark shadows of their past. Bianca refuses to soften the reality. Lucian was forged in an environment where empathy is a fatal error. When this boss experienced genuine affection, his defenses panicked. He treated romance like a militant operation to maintain control. Elena counters that obsessive surveillance is not love. Bianca nods, illuminating the tragic truth. It is the only distorted dialect of affection a fractured man comprehends. When Elena confesses her inability to blindly trust him, Bianca delivers a foundational lesson. Authentic trust is never conjured by magic. It is constructed, brick by brutal brick, through honest choices. Then comes a chilling crescendo. A rival syndicate is actively hunting Elena. Her survival rests entirely on the fact that Lucian stands as a human shield in their path. Before departing, Bianca notes Elena is the only force strong enough to challenge the Dawn. Later, alone in her room, Elena opens her laptop. Look at this moment with me, because the psychological weight is staggering. Lucian actually followed through. He transmitted the blueprints of his entire criminal enterprise, including all access codes. He effectively placed a loaded gun in her hands and pointed it at his own chest. His message contained a single, haunting sentence. "You demanded my power. Here it is. Do what you wish." She stares at the glowing screen, completely paralyzed. The profound lesson strikes with heavy force. True power is never about maintaining dominance over someone. It is possessing the terrifying courage to hand over your fatal weaknesses, trusting they will never pull the trigger. Elena sits in silence, her fingers hovering over the keys that dictate the fate of Lucian's empire. A single tip, and his legacy is reduced to cinders. Yet, if he falls, she loses her shield against the wolves. She forcefully slams the laptop shut. Against all logic, she remains tethered to the monster who shielded her from the storm. She marches down the corridor, pushing open his study door. The ruthless boss looks entirely broken, drowning in ledgers and running on fumes. The truth here is unavoidable. The lesson we must confront is that loving someone does not mean turning a blind eye to the toxic wreckage they leave behind. It means demanding their evolution. She leans against the wood, staring into his exhausted eyes. "I could destroy you right now," she whispers into the quiet. Elena reminds him that one phone call could reduce his empire to ash. Lucian simply nods, shadows catching his face as he pushes his documents aside. He tells her handing over the weapon was his only way to demonstrate absolute trust in a world built on paranoia. She calls him insane. A ghost of a smirk softens his jawline as he asks if she intends to pull the trigger. She steps into his space, her breathing shallow, and asks the question tearing her soul apart. When did she become more than a pawn? His baritone voice splinters. He confesses it was the parking lot, watching her bleed when she expected only cruelty. You and I must understand a profound truth here. The moment you stop viewing others as collateral damage, and finally witness their silent agony, the foundation of your reality forever shifts. He confesses that watching her brace for violence broke a rusted mechanism inside his chest. She carried the exact silent suffering his own mother once endured. If he had let her vanish into the night, her fractured expression would have haunted his every breath. Elena stands paralyzed, the air trapped in her lungs. Lucian drops his armor, revealing his initial approach was pure calculation, but witnessing her rare smile made him want to annihilate anyone who crossed her. That is no longer a ruthless kingpin. That is a desperate man losing his mind. Elena trembles, begging to know if this is another psychological trap. He steps closer, whispering the terrifying reality that she cannot know for sure. The lesson found in this darkness is undeniably brutal. Trust is never a safe equation. It is always a blind, agonizing leap into the unknown. The dim light reveals the despair in his eyes, as he begs her to gamble on a man who spent decades mastering betrayal. He swears his sole ambition is her survival. Stepping closer, he lays down his ultimate wager. If she stays, his criminal empire serves as her impenetrable shield. If she walks away, he promises a new identity and total freedom. When Elena asks why an apex predator would offer such radical selflessness, Lucian gently cups her face. The answer is painfully simple. He loves her. Here is a profound lesson to extract from this moment. Genuine love is never about trapping someone within your personal shadows. It is about handing them the keys to the cage and praying they choose to stay. Looking into his exhausted eyes, Elena recognizes the absolute truth. Perhaps exhaustion has claimed her, or she is too deeply entangled to care. Elena is finished running from the reality that she shares his dark obsession. Her posture shifts as she makes her defining move. If she remains, the old power dynamics must die. No more secrets, no treating her as a disposable chess piece. Then, her voice steadying, she demands the unthinkable. He must teach her the brutal art of violence to survive his world. Lucian agrees to every term, his dark eyes flashing with admiration. She takes a shaky breath and surrenders. She warns him trust is still absent, but she is staying. Stick with me here, because this lesson is vital. Sometimes, the only way to survive an inferno is to step deliberately into the flames and claim ownership of the fire. She tells him not to offer thanks, but to prove her right. The suffocating tension finally shatters. He pulls her into a desperate kiss, and defying all logic, her hands grip his shoulders as she kisses him back. For 2 surreal weeks, the camera drifts through their intimate rhythm. This apex predator spends hours at the firing range, his chest pressed against her back, teaching her to aim a weapon. At night, bathed in the amber glow of the library, they exchange quiet tales of childhood trauma. She writes her tragic manuscript about falling for a monster, and Lucian absorbs every word without judgment. It plays out like a beautiful cinematic dream. Consider this an essential lesson to remember. When the storm pauses and the silence feels too flawless, that is precisely when you must check your blind spots. Tragedy is always waiting patiently in the dark. Tuesday morning arrives, and their illusion of safety shatters. Elena is in the library when Lucian kicks the doors open, his face drained of color. The rival syndicate has tracked them down, leaving mere minutes to vanish. She drops her pages as panic seizes her lungs, but the hourglass has already emptied. Before they reach the grand foyer, the windows explode inward, sending a storm of jagged glass across the marble. Lucian throws his frame over hers, shielding her body as merciless gunfire shreds the walls above them. His security team floods the space, returning fire in a deafening symphony of destruction. Let this terrifying sequence serve as a grounding lesson. Your comfort zone is never a permanent fortress. You must always remain prepared to adapt the very second your reality shatters. Elena lies paralyzed, hands clamped over her ears. This is no longer a tragedy written from a safe distance. The scent of gunpowder is suffocating. Lucian drags her to the kitchen, shoving an oak cabinet against the door. He points to the pantry, screaming about an escape tunnel. Suddenly, a blast turns the barricade into shrapnel as 3 assassins pour inside. Instantly, the composed boss transforms into the blood-soaked monster she was warned about. He drops the chops the first man with crushing force, ignores a bullet tearing through his shoulder, and dismantles the second attacker with his bare hands. It is a horrifying spectacle of violence. Here is a solid truth to remember. Extreme pressure strips away our polite masks, and when survival is on the line, you instantly discover who is willing to bleed for you. The third mercenary lunges for Elena, but muscle memory kicks in. She stomps his foot, drives an elbow into his ribs, and twists free. Yet the physical disparity is simply too vast. A brutal strike to her temple sends her crashing to the tile. Through a dizzying haze, she watches Lucian lose his sanity, charging with pure murder burning in his eyes. But a fourth operator steps from the shadows, pressing a heavy barrel against Lucian's skull. The attacker hauls Elena up by her throat as the rival boss steps into the light. This entire war is built on a ghost. They believe Elena knows where her ex buried a fortune in stolen cash. The lesson here is harsh but unavoidable. You can train for every opponent you see, but the fatal blow always comes from the quiet threat, hiding in your blind spot. The rival kingpin flashes a cold smirk confirming her execution is scheduled once they find the funds. With a gun to his skull, Lucian roars she is innocent, thrashing against his captors. The opposing boss merely laughs. As hands drag Elena through the shattered door, she locks eyes with Lucian. For the first time, the untouchable crime lord looks entirely broken. He screams her name, begging her to remember his love, no matter what comes next. A heavy blow drops her into the dark. She wakes up bound to a rusted chair inside a decaying, blood-stained basement. You and I can take away a profound lesson from this darkness. The true value of love is never proven when the waters are calm. It is only verified in the terrifying moment you have absolutely everything to lose. A single bulb flickers, casting long shadows as 4 enforcers circle her in the damp cellar. The rival boss casually cleans his nails with a hunting knife, demanding the coordinates to her ex-lover's missing millions. Elena shakes violently, sobbing that she knows absolutely nothing. The man's dead eyes reflect a terrifying void of empathy. With a sudden flash of silver, he drags the blade down her pale cheek. An agonizing scream tears from her throat. He leans in close, whispering that the next cut goes straight to the bone if she lies again. The takeaway here is a bitter pill to swallow. Never ignore the toxic red flags of the people you invite into your orbit. Sooner or later, you will be the one forced to pay their karmic debts with your own blood. She swears she is telling the truth, but the men simply smile. Let us watch this brutal scene unfold together. The enforcer's fist connects with sickening force, splintering the chair and sending Elena crashing to the concrete. He laughs, raising the dripping blade for a final strike. Elena squeezes her bruised eyes shut, clinging to Lucian's promise. Suddenly, the heavy iron door blows off its hinges in a blinding cloud of smoke. Lucian strides through the falling debris, completely drenched in crimson, twin handguns steady. His calm voice drops the room to freezing. Before the men can even twitch, he moves with the fluid grace of a pure killer. 2 enforcers hit the floor, dead instantly. He ends the third with a stolen knife, his chest heaving with violent devotion. Here is a brutal truth about survival. Sometimes, when backed into an inescapable corner, the universe sends a monster exactly when you need one. The final hitman makes a fatal miscalculation, hauling Elena up to use her as a human shield. Lucian clears the distance in a blur, wrenching the man's arm backward until the bone shatters with a sickening crack. The assassin wails as Lucian presses the hot barrel between his eyes, demanding one reason not to shoot. The metallic scent of blood hangs heavy in the air. Then Elena's fractured voice cuts through his blinding rage. She begs him to drop the weapon, warning that executing this broken man proves the world right about him. He may be a monster, but he is hers, and she is pleading for his soul. In a stunning display of restraint, the crime lord exhales and slowly lowers his gun. Listen closely to this final thought. True power is never demonstrated by pulling the trigger. Absolute power is the quiet discipline to know when to hold your fire. Lucian pins the trembling survivor against the blood-stained stone. His voice is a guttural rumble, promising that if the rival syndicate ever looks at Elena again, he will burn their empire to ash. The broken man flees, and the ruthless enforcer shatters. He drops to his knees, his scarred hands shaking violently as he cuts Elena from her bindings, drowning in suffocating guilt. Yet she reaches up. Her warm fingers steady his knuckles, whispering that his mercy is his true strength. He lifts her gently, carrying her away from the shadows. You and I have seen salvation take many forms, but the lesson here is absolute. Genuine love is the only anchor heavy enough to hold us steady when our most destructive storms finally break. The drive back is buried in suffocating silence. Lucian grips her hand, terrified she might vanish. Beneath the blinding lights of an underground clinic, a shadow surgeon sews 12 agonizing stitches across her pale cheek. It is a permanent signature of the violent underworld. But as Elena studies her reflection, the camera reveals a profound shift. The terrified girl from last month has vanished. She stared into the abyss and emerged breathing, accepting her place in this dark reality. When Lucian enters, His broad shoulders are crushed by the guilt of her pain. She turns, her eyes blazing with fierce resolve, and commands him to bury his regret. We must remember this vital truth. Sometimes, surviving your absolute darkest nightmare is the exact thing required to finally wake up and claim your own destiny. The dimly lit bedroom feels unbearably heavy. Elena reaches out, her fingertips tracing the dried crimson across the exhausted enforceress forehead. She speaks in a fragile whisper, placing the blame for this trauma on her own past. But Lucien catches her gaze, his voice fracturing under the weight of a terrifying devotion. He confesses he would have gladly burned the entire world to ash, just to keep her safe. It is a beautifully broken loyalty that completely dismantles her last remaining walls. Elena leans into him, pressing her lips to his to pull his shattered soul back from the dark, admitting she felt the exact same violent fire when his life was on the line. It leaves us with a quiet truth. The people who look like dangerous, unforgiving ruins are often the only ones truly willing to go to war for you. That heavy confession lingers before Lucien pulls her close, kissing her with the desperate hunger of a condemned man. Elena has awakened to the dark reality of her own heart. She is bound to this lethal enforcer, a man who dragged her into a violent underworld, yet remains the only soul she genuinely trusts. They stumble toward the bed, their clothes still stained with the night's brutality. Beyond the frosted glass, distant sirens slice through the freezing city air. The rival syndicate is actively hunting them down, but Elena no longer cares. Let us take a moment to understand this deeply moving fact. The entire world is actively trying to tear you apart, finding that one wonderfully flawed person to stand back to back with in the wreckage means absolutely everything. The fallout throws them headfirst into a suffocating underworld war. For 3 agonizing weeks, they survive like hunted wolves, moving between freezing safe houses while Lucien's loyal men are gunned down. The psychological decay is devastating. Elena tries desperately to hold her nerve, but even the sound of a closing car door makes her heart hammer with terror. Beside her, Lucien is rapidly fading into a remorseless phantom. He runs on pure adrenaline, orchestrating bloody street executions from the shadows while ignoring sleep entirely. He is consumed by a corrosive obsession to keep her safe through unrelenting violence. The tragedy painting this scene is painfully clear. A relentless thirst for vengeance does not simply punish your enemies. It slowly and quietly consumes whatever is left of your own humanity. On the 19th morning, the silence of their penthouse shatters. Lucien throws a thick dossier onto the glass table. His sunken eyes radiate a cold, calculated intent to murder. He has finally located Marco, the ghost who ordered Elena's abduction. The target sits inside a heavily fortified compound guarded by private militia. But Lucien is done calculating the odds. He is finished watching the woman he loves flinch at shadows. His voice is gravel as he swears the nightmare ends tonight. Then, he does something beautifully unexpected. He hands her a choice. She can remain safely locked inside this gilded cage, or step into the violent storm right beside him. It highlights a simple but heavy truth. True loyalty means handing someone the terrifying truth and letting them consciously choose their own fate. He stares into her exhausted eyes, his voice breaking under the weight of fear. He admits that if he leaves her behind, she will spend every agonizing second waiting for the call saying, "He is dead." In that fragile breath, the trauma from the basement floods back. But instead of shattering, Elena finds her inner steel. She shuts her laptop, her gaze unwavering, and tells him she is coming along. If they are walking into the abyss, they are doing it together. The ruthless enforcer is completely undone. He pulls her tightly against his chest, burying his face in her hair, whispering brokenly that he could never deserve a love like hers. The lesson here is deeply moving. Loving someone with your whole soul means you never let them walk into the fire alone. Marco's compound is a brutal concrete fortress, dominating the landscape with sniper towers and armed patrols. But Lucien does not arrive quietly. He deploys with 12 elite operators, merciless ghosts, trained to erase problems from the earth. And right there among the killers is Elena. She is weighed down by a heavy Kevlar vest, her knuckles white, as she grips the pistol Lucian taught her to shoot. His final command was chillingly absolute. If a threat gets close, pull the trigger without hesitation. Now, she crouches behind an armored sedan in the freezing night, listening to Lucian calmly coordinate a massive explosive breach over the radio. The lesson here is written in pure survival. Careful preparation is everything, because walking blindly into a chaotic storm is really just planning your own destruction. The tension in the freezing air is absolutely suffocating. Lucian checks his watch, his eyes a haunting collision of desperate love and killer instinct. He places a fail-safe into her trembling hands. If his squad is not back in 30 minutes, she must take the burner phone and vanish forever. He kisses her fiercely before melting into the dark woods. Suddenly, the quiet shatters. A massive blast paints the pitch-black sky a violent orange. Deafening gunfire tears through the trees, twisted with the frantic screams of Marco's men. Hidden in the biting cold, Elena covers her ears tightly, fighting back a suffocating wave of panic. It presents a cruel reality we all must eventually face. Sometimes the most agonizing battle you will ever fight is the painful, helpless terror of waiting in the dark. As Elena's mind spirals, a heavy shadow slams against the car window. She raises the trembling pistol, prepared to fire, but stops when she recognizes Dante, Lucian's bloodied lieutenant. He yanks the door open, delivering a devastating blow. Marco is refusing to negotiate. The boss demands that Elena walk through the fortress gates unarmed. His terrifying leverage. Lucian's squad is pinned down by snipers, and Marco has dragged a beaten hostage into the spotlight. It is Grayson, her deeply toxic ex-boyfriend. Marco is offering a sadistic trade her life for his. You and I know karma has a wicked sense of timing. It is a brutal lesson in how this world operates. Your unresolved past will absolutely return to haunt you, usually at the exact moment you are desperately dodging actual bullets. The tension hangs in the freezing air like thick smoke. Dante delivers the agonizing truth. Her king, Lucian, is trapped in the dark, bleeding and fighting desperately in the mud just to keep his crew breathing. If another loyal soul drops tonight, the guilt will consume Lucian alive. The camera captures a profound, chilling shift in Elena's eyes as she stares at the war zone. She does not run. She looks Dante dead in the eye and demands he take her inside. The heavy oak doors groan open to Marco's lavish office. It looks deceivingly quiet, but right in the center sits Grayson, battered and zip-tied to a steel chair. Behind him, Marco puffs a cigar like he owns the night. Sometimes, you simply cannot hide from the flames. You have to walk straight into the jaws of the dragon if you want to save your kingdom. The air grows colder as we meet Marco, the ruthless architect of this misery. He takes a drag from his cigar, exhaling a twisted truth. Elena's lethal new fiancé did not start this bloody turf war. The blood spilling tonight is entirely on the hands of her cowardly ex, Grayson, who stole $20 million from Marco's syndicate. Grayson trembles violently, weeping as he swears the market simply tanked. But Marco silences him with a terrifying chuckle. The fool bolted Mafia money on cryptocurrency and tried to cover his tracks with forged spreadsheets. Elena stands frozen, the sheer weight of her ex's pathetic deceit sinking deep into her bones. Let me tell you something about the dark side of the street. Never mix fake numbers with real killers, because the math will always catch up to you, in the worst way possible. Marco refuses to simply walk away. He stands there, his smile hollow, looking at a trembling Grayson as if he were just a discarded prop on a dark stage. But when his cold eyes shift to Elena, the atmosphere thickens. He is convinced she holds the keys to the offshore accounts. Leaning in close, Marco forces a brutal choice. Make Lucian surrender, or these city streets will drown in blood. Elena slowly lowers her gaze to her ex. This is the man who spent years tearing down her spirit, laughing at her every dream. Now his heartbeat depends on her mercy. You and I can feel the crushing irony in this room. It teaches us something we often forget. Never break another person's spirit, because one day, the soul you shattered might be the only one who can save your life. Grayson weeps on the cold floor, a wretched portrait of pure desperation. He spills his monstrous past, begging only to save his own skin. The silence is suffocating, and the focus shifts to Elena. She remembers the second Lucian pulled her from that abyss. Instead of playing the victim, she completely flips the script. Her eyes lock onto Marco, sharp and unyielding, as she delivers a stunning counteroffer. Grayson will return the full $20 million. In exchange, she demands total peace. Marco laughs at the absurdity of a king pardoning a thief, but Elena does not blink. She tells him it is his only choice before Lucian burns his legacy to the ground. Knowing your own worth and wielding it like a blade is the truest power anyone can ever possess. There is a magnetic pull to a character who absolutely refuses to break. Elena holds the gaze of this ruthless mob boss, ice running through her veins. She makes a quiet, deadly promise. Lucian will bankrupt his empire, forcing Marco to watch everything he built turn to ash. Marco sits perfectly still in the dim lighting. The heavy shadows paint his face as he studies her. Finally, a low laugh escapes his chest. He openly admits her spine is made of iron, realizing exactly why the city's most feared man is so devoted to her. Moving to a hidden wall safe, Marco pulls out a silver laptop and folds to her demands. In the darkest chapters of our lives, we have to plant our feet firmly. An unshakable, quiet confidence is the only armor that can ever repel a true tyrant. The tension in the room snaps as Marco slams the laptop onto the desk. He slices Grayson free, delivering a lethal warning. The ugly physical toll of cowardice is fully exposed. Sweat pours down Grayson's pale face, his hands shaking violently over the keys. For 20 agonizing minutes, Elena stands silently, watching the man who once destroyed her completely fall apart, surrendering every encrypted password. Marco stands back, watching his soldiers verify the massive transfer on their phones. The cold blue screens light up their harsh, tired faces. Finally, Marco gives a slow, grim nod. The money is secured. He barks rapid Italian into his phone, calling off the bloody war. You can never trust a traitor. But if you back a terrified coward into a dark corner, they will always sing. The air grows suffocating as Marco whispers his final threat. Mercy is a heavy debt he will collect. Elena drags her ex out into the freezing night only to stop dead. Lucian steps from the heavy fog, looking like a ruined, fallen angel. His suit is torn, his chest heaving with unchecked aggression. He yells, demanding to know why she left the safe house. But Elena holds her ground against his fury. She calmly explains she just ended the war and saved Grayson's miserable life. Lucian is paralyzed. He cannot comprehend why she would risk everything for the man who abused her. She looks at her fractured king, her voice soft but absolute. She chose mercy, having the absolute power to destroy someone, but choosing to let them walk away is the truest measure of our humanity. Elena refuses to back down, choosing grace for a man who belonged in a grave. Lucian stares, the violent cycle of his life, warring against his profound relief. He gives Grayson 10 seconds to vanish, and the coward scrambles into the mist. Lucian pulls Elena tight against his chest, his voice cracking as he shouts that she could have been killed. She challenges his need to control the narrative. They are equals now. Her days of hiding while he bleeds are over. The terrifying crime boss finally softens. His blood-stained fingers trace her jawline, confessing his absolute terror of losing her. Let us look at this piece by piece, shall we? True devotion is never about waiting in the shadows. It is about walking directly into the storm and standing firmly beside your partner. She promises to stay anchored to his side, no matter how dark the shadows grow. Lucian clings to her, holding on as if she alone sustains his heartbeat. But the grim toll remains. 3 lives extinguished, 7 wounded. It is a heavy weight Elena will carry forever. Yet the darkest tragedies often pivot toward the light. 6 months later, the scene shifts to a warmly lit Manhattan bookstore. Elena stands proud, holding her published novel. The dedication page thanks Lucian for proving that true affection embraces our deepest flaws. Right beside her, wearing a sharp tuxedo and visibly despising the camera flashes, is her former king of the underworld. We will gladly endure absolute discomfort just to watch the people we love step into the light. Lucian clearly hates the exhausting media circus, but he remains firmly planted by her side. He asks softly how it feels to hold her lifelong dream. Elena confesses a lingering anxiety, worrying critics will say she romanticized a toxic world. Lucian shatters that insecurity, reminding her she simply documented the raw reality of surviving trauma. What the cameras miss is that over the last 6 months, this terrifying boss dismantled his syndicate. He traded his bloody crown for legitimate reality, ensuring his violence could never affect her future. He even opened a charity for marginalized women. This beautiful arc proves that profound redemption is always possible. It is never too late to construct something beautiful from the wreckage of your past. That charity is Lucian's ultimate act of atonement. But amid the celebration, Elena spots a ghost lingering near the bookshelves. It is Grayson. He looks hollowed out, reduced to a fragile shell by his fraud convictions. Across the crowded room, their eyes lock for one final cinematic beat. Grayson slowly raises a copy of her novel in a silent, defeated salute before vanishing into the cold rain. Lucian senses the shift in the room's energy. His protective instincts flare as he steps closer, quietly asking if she is okay. Elena offers a warm, grounded smile and tells him she is completely fine. For the first time in her life, it is the absolute truth. You owe your painful past nothing. The truest form of healing is simply dropping those heavy chains and walking steadily into the sunlight. The event stretches into 3 grueling hours of media questions. Elena dodges reporters, guarding the irony that the terrifying mob boss from her chapters is standing 10 feet away, scrolling on his phone with absolute boredom. When the night concludes, Lucian drives her home. Notice the deliberate cinematic shift here. They do not return to a fortified penthouse. Instead, they arrive at an ordinary brownstone in a quiet Brooklyn neighborhood. They tore down their chaotic past, just to build this beautifully mundane life. Elena kicks off her heels, collapsing onto the couch with an exhausted laugh, begging him to cancel all future tours. You and I have to appreciate this quiet resolution. Securing a safe, peaceful sanctuary with the person you love is the only victory that truly matters. Lucian mentions her upcoming book tour, and Elena responds with an exhausted groan. He chuckles, his scarred hands gently massaging her tired feet. He reminds her that readers connected with her raw honesty. She never hid that loving a complicated man requires immense endurance. Elena simply watches him in the warm lamplight. This former architect of violence, a man who burned empires to ash to keep her safe, is now her sanctuary. The narrative pacing slows to a crawl. She looks into his dark eyes and softly whispers that she is pregnant. The silence in the room becomes incredibly dense. He freezes, his expression shifting from residual trauma to an overwhelming, profound joy. The most beautiful chapters only begin the second we drop our defensive armor and fully embrace the future. Picture this striking visual. The phantom of the city is emotionally undone. Elena reveals 3 positive tests, her voice trembling as she analyzes his past and what it means for a child. Lucian silences her anxiety with a slow, anchoring kiss. This terrifying figure, feared by thousands, has genuine tears pooling in his eyes as he whispers that it is perfect. This highlights a core truth. No foundation we lay is ever flawless, but when a life is yours, you fiercely protect it. The narrative leaps forward 2 years. Elena sits in the amber glow of her home library, outlining her next manuscript. Curled up beside her is little Isabella, fast asleep. The frame lingers on the toddler, who already sports her father's midnight hair, her mother's analytical eyes, and a streak of fierce independence. Let us open on a scene you and I have rarely witnessed in this brutal world. The camera lingers on a man whose empire is constructed on spilled blood, entirely unraveled by the fragile rise and fall of his newborn daughter's chest. The ruthless king of the underworld dissolves into the shadows, humming a quiet lullaby. Yet, the sins of his past refuse to sleep. Paranoia transforms their sanctuary into a fortress of armed men and sweeping cameras. Elena watches his silhouette, realizing a terrifying truth about connection. Love strips away your armor, leaving your throat exposed to the blade. But it gives you the monstrous strength to protect what matters. The quiet lesson here is absolute. Our greatest legacies are never the bloody crowns we wear, but the fragile, beating hearts we fiercely choose to defend. The camera tracks Elena as she cradles her daughter by the frosted glass, her gaze lost in the neon bleed of the Brooklyn streets below. The lighting here is deeply melancholic. She reflects on the ghost of her former self, a shattered girl who allowed venomous men to convince her she was nothing. That fragile iteration is buried deep. Look at the resilience painted across her posture now. You can survive absolute darkness, gather a heavy map of scars, and still claw your way back to the surface. She stands as a sovereign now, having tamed the beast who walks through the door. Lucian steps into the room, a tailored suit wrapped around the cold exhaustion of the streets. But as his eyes find his family, the winter in his stare completely melts. The lesson remains simple. True safety is not finding a world without teeth, but finding the one person who makes the chaos outside fade to absolute silence. Notice the chilling cinematic juxtaposition unfolding in the dim light of the bedroom. Lucian presses a lingering, tender kiss to his wife's temple, shifting without a single jagged breath from a devoted husband into the cold architect of a cartel power vacuum. His main rival has just met an untimely, highly orchestrated end. We see the mechanics of a manufactured tragedy moving behind his dark eyes. His voice, cracking like thin ice, reveals that the rival streets will soon run red, yet their home will remain untouched. He bought the loyalty of the opposing inner circle years ago. The next king only sits on that throne because Lucian designed the chair. Elena absorbs this brutal reality without blinking. It brings us to a harsh, necessary truth about survival. If you are not playing 5 moves ahead of the wolves in the dark, you have already offered yourself as their next meal. The lens focuses on Elena's steady gaze, capturing her lucid understanding of the predator she married. She watches this man who neutralizes human threats with terrifying, surgical detachment, feeling only a profound gratitude for the perimeter of violence he maintains around their sanctuary. The heavy silence shatters as a sharp wail echoes from the nursery down the hall. In a stroke of brilliant visual irony, the merciless lord of the underground sprints down the corridor to change a diaper. Hours bleed away, and the estate settles into quiet. Lena finds him standing on the balcony, drowning in the glowing skyline. He whispers a confession that splinters his iron facade. He never thought he would live long enough to witness a quiet night. It exposes a deeply human reality. Sometimes, the most dangerous souls on this earth are simply waging absolute war just to secure a peaceful patch of ground to call home. Our camera tightens on Lucien's shadowed face. He is a man who once consumed the pure adrenaline of destruction, addicted to the cold math of dismantling rival families. Tonight, however, the grand architect of ruin is completely sense-charmed by the soft breathing of his wife and child. Elena traces the harsh, uncompromising geography of his jawline, fully aware that she is holding a monster. Yet, she loves him with a ferocity that defies logic. Tangled in the heavy silk sheets, the scene flashes back to their violent genesis. A blown tire on a rain-slicked road, the terrifying, blind leap of getting into a dangerous stranger's black sedan. It forces us to confront the terrifying fragility of a single life. One seemingly invisible choice, made in the desperate isolation of a midnight storm, possesses the absolute power to rewrite your entire destiny, delivering either salvation or utter devastation. Let the camera drift through the sliding doors of her alternate reality. Had she dialed a tow truck in that freezing rain, she would still be pouring bitter coffee to fund a hollow, lonely existence. Instead, she chose to walk straight into the fire. The lighting shifts drastically to the blinding glare of stage lights. She stands tall as a celebrated author, wearing the pale, jagged scar on her cheek like a diamond crown. She earned that violent mark by by loving a man willing to burn the city to ash for her. The elite crowd in the theater whispers their romanticized fantasies, assuming her husband is a reformed beast. But the psychological truth of their world is that blood never washes completely out of the floorboards. It drives home an inescapable conclusion. Real strength is never about dodging the shrapnel life throws at you. It is about gathering your shattered pieces and forging a blade. We strip away the velvet facade of this glamour evening. Lucian remains an unyielding architect of the dark, keeping elite mercenaries on payroll while quietly pouring millions into children's and charities. He is a walking contradiction, a violent savior. Tonight, he occupies the front row of the gala, radiating the tightly coiled energy of a predator trapped in a cage. Resting on his knee is their young daughter, her eyes a terrifying mirror of his own calculating stare. Elena looks down at her fiercely dangerous family and feels an overwhelming surge of pride. She leans into the microphone, delivering a speech that surgically dissects the room. She demands they stop burying their ugly mistakes and start wearing their scars openly. It serves as a vital reminder for all of us. True power does not stem from a polished, flawless illusion. It rises from owning the raw, broken, unapologetic truth of who you are. Stick with me here, because this is where the emotional armor finally cracks. The camera catches a heavy irony that you and I might have missed. The untouchable king of the underworld is fighting a single tear. It is a microscopic fracture, but Elena sees it all. The scene cuts to a dimly lit restaurant, where the power dynamic takes a sharp turn. Their young daughter is commanding the room, using a vocabulary she absolutely did not learn from a cartel. Elena leans in, whispering that their child is destined to be a beautiful nightmare. Lucian nods, but suddenly the air is sucked from the room. He reaches across the linen, his voice dropping to gravel. The man who commands armies confesses he is paralyzed by the terror that his violent history will one day kick their door off the hinges. It is a bitter pill to swallow. You can construct a shining future, but your dark past will always demand its payment. The framing here is intensely claustrophobic. Lucian is drowning under the suffocating weight of his own guilt, paralyzed by the thought of his darkness infecting the family. But Elena refuses to let him spiral. She locks her unwavering gaze onto his, anchoring him to the reality that they are permanently bound in this beautiful disaster. The suffocating tension snaps when their daughter casually asks about her dinner. Instantly, the mob boss shifts gears, delivering a tactical breakdown of the pasta, as if he were briefing a lieutenant before a raid. Watching this bizarre, tender display, Elena realizes this chaotic existence is exactly where she is meant to be. Later, surrounded by the towering shelves of their library, Lucian looks at her with heavy reverence. He is entirely in awe that she took their blood-soaked nightmare and spun it into gold. True loyalty is having the courage to build your empire in the mud. The silence in the library is thick enough to stop a bullet. Elena steps into the frame, locking eyes with the phantom who has been both her executioner and her absolute salvation. She demands the unvarnished truth. Does he harbor regret for the initial manipulation? For weaponizing a psychological profile to snare her? The ruthless king hesitates, the shadows deepening across his face. He whispers a ragged apology for the deceit, but the camera pushes in as he closes the distance, his lethal hands gently framing her face. He swears on his soul he will never apologize for burning the world down to claim her, and Elena leans into the warmth of the hands that have ended lives. She took a marriage built on a foundation of absolute lies and engineered an unbreakable fortress. The lesson rings out in the dark. You rarely get to choose the violent tragedy of your beginning, but you hold the pen that writes your end. The shot lingers on the desperate kiss they share in the wreckage of their past. We smash cut through years of spilled blood and empire, building, landing, on a starkly lit dining room. Elena sits across from their teenage daughter, Bella. There are no sanitized fables allowed in this house. Elena pours out the brutal, unfiltered reality. She walks Fruit Street. She walks her daughter through the blown tire in the rain, and the lethal syndicate boss waiting in the shadows. She dissects the sheer psychological agony of anchoring her life to a man who is walking collateral damage. Bella absorbs every heavy word, radiating her mother's cold fire and her father's terrifyingly calculating gaze. It forces us to look at the ugly truth. A real family is never a pristine, white picket fantasy. It is the brutal commitment of waking up every single day and choosing your people, even when the ground beneath you is actively catching fire. The cinematic tension peaks as Bella finally asks the agonizing question that has haunted this house. She asks her mother if surviving that endless underworld Schwupfa was truly worth the psychological destruction. Elena does not even blink. Her voice is a blade of absolute conviction, as she states that every scar, every night drowning in cold sweats, was a bargain because it gave her Bella. But then the maternal instinct takes over, softening the scene. She warns her daughter that she never has to bleed for affection or construct a life on broken glass. Bella nods quietly, promising to steer clear of the fire. But Elena is a master of human nature. She remembers her own reckless youth, utterly convinced she could waltz with the devil and survive. She knows the young will always chase their own ruin, and that is the quiet tragedy of parenthood. You can scream warnings, but people must survive the fires they start themselves. Let us look at this together. You cannot build a wall high enough to shield the people you love from fate. You can only hold them when the madness comes. That is how Lucienne loved her flawed, but desperately real. Picture the scene. It is a freezing, rainy night. Elena stands perfectly still, staring out the towering glass of their brownstone. Her mind drifts back to that desolate parking lot where a stranger shattered her world. She burned that broke barista away, stepping from the ash as a reigning queen. Then, the kingpin himself steps from the shadows, wrapping his arms around her waist. The takeaway here is beautiful. Your absolute lowest, most terrifying moment can become the exact soil where your greatest reinvention takes root. You just have to claim it. His voice rumbles through the quiet room, asking what she is thinking. Elena leans against his chest, murmuring that she feels lucky. Catch the dark irony in that. Lucien lets out a low laugh, reminding his wife that he dragged her into a criminal nightmare. He knows he is the villain. But Elena turns, looking the man who ruined and rebuilt her life dead in the eyes. Thinking of their daughter and their empire, she swears she would not trade a single breathless second. His hard edge softens instantly. He is the lucky one, he whispers. She smiles. We found each other, she says gently. Here is the truth about gratitude. It is never about having a pristine past. It is looking at the beautiful, chaotic reality you survived, and knowing you are exactly where you belong. The frightened girl she used to be is just a ghost. Now she learned the harshest truth of all. You cannot control the violence that finds you, but you dictate the person you become in the aftermath. She stared a ruthless monster in the eyes, found the buried soul beneath, and saved herself. Today, she pulls other women out of the shadows. She loves him because real romance is not a polished movie script. It is seeing a person with all their darkest demons, choosing to stay, and trusting them to catch you. As thunder rumbles over the city, they hold each other in the quiet dark. Keep this simple lesson in your heart. True strength is never about dodging the pain of your story. It is taking the shattered pieces of your wreckage and building an impenetrable fortress. Let us bring this story in for a landing. Right now, in some flickering empty parking lot, another girl is crying over a dead engine. Elena hopes a kind stranger pulls over. But honestly, she prays that if a dangerous man with a cold smile rolls up making promises, that girl has the sense to run. Not everyone has the armor required to survive a violent romance. Elena was exceptionally stubborn and wildly lucky. Against every odd, she survived the dark. She is the boss of her own world now, and that is a beautiful thing to witness. So here is your final midnight lesson. Always listen to that quiet alarm in your gut. The universe might toss you a wild second chance, but you need the wisdom to know when to sprint for the exit and when to plant your feet and build your empire.
Lucien public destruction of Grayson at the engagement party gives Elena a complicated kind of justice. Grayson humiliated her, belittled her dreams, and tried to make her feel worthless. When Lucien exposes his crimes and accelerates his arrest in front of wealthy guests, Elena sees the man who once mocked her suddenly stripped of power. On one level, this feels satisfying. Grayson is not innocent. He has committed fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. His downfall is not invented. However, the education lesson is that revenge, even when aimed at a guilty person, can still be frightening when it happens without consent. Lucien does not ask Elena whether she wants this public punishment. He decides for her. That matters. Elena's reaction shows that justice and control can become tangled when one person spires on another person's behalf without including them. Viewers can learn that revenge may validate pain, but it does not automatically heal the person who was hurt. Elena is not only impressed, she is shaken. She realizes Lucien can destroy someone's life with a phone call and that his protection comes with terrifying reach. The lesson is not that Grayson deserved mercy. The lesson is that healing should not depend on someone else's violence, influence, or revenge fantasy. Real justice should restore agency to the injured person, not make them feel like a spectator in their own life. Lucien's actions prove his devotion, but they also prove his danger. Educationally, the story encourages viewers to be careful with people who say, "I did this for you," when they never asked what you actually wanted. Accountability matters, but so does consent. A victory that leaves you afraid of your protector is not complete healing.